So listen, let's get started by, if you can write into chat, the things that you need to take photo reading to the next level in your life. Now, only Paul and I are going to see what you write, so you don't have to worry about other people seeing them. Let us know what's going on. And we've already had some questions submitted before the session, and we're going to be covering these. And one of the questions is, what's the most important thing I can do right now to get better with photo reading? Another one is, how do I photo read legislative acts such as laws, directives, and regulations? And then also from someone else, something similar, I started a new job and I'm overwhelmed by the detailed and technical information that I need to know. What do I do? And someone asked, I struggle learning anything online. What tips can you give me? And what are the 3 top paraliminals to help with my photo reading? And then I watched you photo read immediately answer questions from that link that was sent out yesterday. And how can I get that good? So we will be addressing that too. Paul, anything you want to start off with?
Well, I'm delighted that you're here. I'm so happy that you're interested in up-leveling your skills of photo reading. That's what this is all about. Each and every one of us can get better and better at this spectacular skill of photo reading. And yet there's this interesting paradox, Pete, that we always talk about, which is, wait, we're born with the capacity to be able to do this. So it's not something that's outside of the realm of possibility. It's just, how do we find our way into using these natural skills? And photo reading is a step-by-step technique to give us access to these tremendous capabilities that are within us.
Yeah, and I remember back in the 80s when you first called me up and told me about the possibility of photo reading. And at that particular moment, I had known all my life that something like this was possible. I just did not know how to do it. So as soon as I, started to play with it, learned with it, I just took to it immediately and absolutely have fallen in love with it. I fell in love with it from the very first moment you mentioned that to me on the telephone. I remember that call so well, so vividly.
And it's true also that there are a lot of naturally occurring photo readers, people who have invented it inside of their own necessity to get through piles of materials. In fact, when I was going to my undergraduate degree, I photo read out of necessity. And when I was all done, I got an A on the final exam. I said, oh, thank you, God, I'll never do that again. I'll never put it off to the last minute. And I was so close to realizing, oh my gosh, this is the way it's supposed to be. I actually didn't discover that until graduate school. But, this is the thing, is because we're all naturally gifted with a vast non-conscious mind that can take amazing amounts of information in. And we're also gifted with a pre-conscious processor that is the route into that inner mind. It's just a matter of being able to use it. And that's what I think is the essence of that film. For anybody who watched it, this one that you put up, Pete, American Breakthrough, the breakthrough is to recognize that this is a capacity that we all have available to us.
Exactly. Paul, here's some of the things that folks wrote in the chat. I had trouble activating. I'd like to have better recall. Your Facebook page is open. And a lot of things about activation. And I want to get good at being able to learn how, I want to be able to do what I did in the infomercial. I want to be able to read better using computer or Kindle. I want consistency. I want better activation. I want to learn how to photo read and get into coding. I want better at post viewing and wondering why I always get into old-fashioned reading when I do the post view. Making a career change, I need to learn machine learning, and so on and so forth. So a lot of those things are what we're going to be talking about today. So Paul, shall we get going?
Absolutely. Let's get started. Where do you like to start?
Well, let's start with the first question that I read off a little bit ago too. What's the most important thing I can do right now to get better with photo reading?
Okay, so here's the thing about better. Okay, and I'm going to put the word better in quotations. 100% of people who go through the photo reading program, they go like this. I say, I know I'm going to have to practice this to get really good at it. And I say, no, don't do this thing about, oh, I've got to create this artificial time to go practice my photo reading. No. You have books that you want to get through? Photo read them. Photo read them first is the very first step. Drop in, flip those pages, drop in, tell your mind it's there. Let's get access to it, and then go use the rest of the system. Now, is that practice? In a way, what's true is we need time on task to feel comfortable with this unusual way of starting our reading process. Somebody hands us something to read, is the first thing we do stop, take a deep breath in, put a tangerine on the back of our heads? No, we just start reading. So we're driving a little bit of a wedge in your habitual way of practicing reading. We're adding these additional steps so we can turn on the power of the whole mind, letting our pre-conscious processor do more of the heavy lifting of making sense of this page of nonsense. You see, out of a page of text, we think, as a result of our schooling, that every single word is equally important. But during photo reading, we learn only 4 to 11% of the words on that page carry the meaning. But which 4 to 11%? If all I do is read one word at a time from the beginning to the end, in order to determine what 4 to 11% are the important ones, too late. Right? We've already invested all that time. So when we're photo reading, flip, we're saying, hey, mind, tell me what it is I should be focusing on to meet my purpose. And that's where the inner mind is doing the heavy lifting. We've got this natural capacity, taking in tens of millions of bits of information per second. What we need to do is we need to put it to work on our behalf, not turning it off in order to force the conscious mind to have to do everything at 7 plus or minus 2 bits of information at a time. I mean, 5 bits of information compared to 10 million. I think it makes a lot of sense that we should put that processor that does 10 million bits a second to work for us. So that's really the first way you're going to up level your photo reading, is photo read everything. Photo read everything. So what's the first step of photo reading? Is establish your purpose and prepare yourself. So what do I want out of this? Take a deep breath in, get into that ideal state, relaxed awareness, focus on that top back part of your head, open your eyes, boom, get into it. That's the thing that's going to make the biggest difference. Just drive a wedge into your normal routine, add this addition that puts the true power of your brain mind to work for you.
Excellent. So Paul, a couple people have written saying that I know how to do it. I know what the steps are. I just don't do it. Tips?
Exactly. And why should you? If you grew up believing that it's your conscious mind that has to do all the work of reading, we've come, not because it's a better way to go, but we've come to it because that's our habit. So it's interesting in making personal changes, Pete. You know, I've written a doctorate on transformational learning and transformational change. Is once you get the insight, you realize, yeah, you know, this is a better way to go. You still have to do the transformational change. And that's why we want to come to you today, is to say, your brain can do this. And you might not be feeling the necessity, and so you fall back into old habits. It's, in a way, I like to think of it as you have a compulsion to read in a dysfunctional way. You're compelled to read in a dysfunctional way. not because it's a better way to read, but because it's your habit. And here's the interesting thing about the human mind, Pete. We make normal whatever it is that's going on. And right now, it's more normal to read in a dysfunctional way, one word at a time, start of the page to the end of the page, slog along, take forever to get through it. That's normal, but it doesn't make sense. And you know it doesn't make sense as a result of taking photo reading. So it's about being more comfortable with a new normal. And that's why doing it, just doing it as a normal part of your routine and picking up any new book is a great way to go. Same thing with any report or any magazine. Doesn't take very long to go flip through a magazine. And I recommend doing it backwards, from the back to the front, even doing it upside down from the back to the front. Perfect. When that becomes more normal to you, you'll recognize how much your inner mind can come in and help you get to your goal. Remember, the purpose of photo reading is to get through the reading you have at a level of comprehension you need in the time that you have available. So what's the level of comprehension you need and how much time you're willing to devote to it? Let's go. Let's use it. And this is the way that you're going to get there.
So Paul, I remember back in the olden days when we were just, developing photo reading and learning how to use it. One of the things that I did is I went to the library and got boxes of books, and I would put them on stack on a table, and I would photo read 5 to 10 books a day. But what I would do is I would have one stack, and I knew that stack had to disappear and go on to the other end of the table. So that was my reminder to be doing that. And I would just walk by that, I'd stop, I'd photo read a book, then I'd go on and do something else. And that became very easy then for me to be able to photo read everything that I come in contact with.
That's exactly right. And then you remember also in the early days, in the very first course we ran, there's a woman who became our master certifying instructor, Lynette Ayers. She was a former school teacher. She was a business owner. And when she came to take our instructor training, we knew she was the person because for a couple of years while she was still a school teacher, anytime we had a newspaper or a magazine that wanted to do an interview of somebody who'd gone through photo reading, we'd always send it to her because she had such phenomenal results. Well, what was the secret of her success? During her lunch break every day at school, she would go into the media lab at her school and flip pages. Just flip pages. That was all she did. She didn't do any of the other activation. She said, Paul Scheele told me I should just photo read. So that's what I did. And she went through the encyclopedia. She went through all the books that she could get her hands on. And she was our original success story. And I have to say, and she would as well, the main reason, just like you recognize, it's just a matter of doing it, because then these natural pathways that the brain has the ability to take in and bring out information, the route to your inner mind is made more accessible through the doing. If you think of it, say there's a big grassy field there in front of you and you walk across that grass field. The next day, when you come to that same spot, you're going to see the faint outline of the path you walked yesterday. You walk it again, what happens? It gets a little more trampled down. You're literally building a neural highway to information processing that we're talking about. And at first, it's just a little path, and then it's a sidewalk, and then it's a street, and then it's a highway, and then it's an interstate. It's a super highway. And that's what we have the ability to do, continue to make wider these natural pathways to the rich resources that are within us.
So Paul, I mentioned earlier that someone asked what are the 3 top paraliminals to help with photo reading, and a few other people asked questions like that in the chat. So what paraliminals do you think would be particularly useful for people in terms of using the system in the first place, and then getting the results that you want from it? And then even a third one, someone asked, one of the issues that I have with photo reading is I have this little fear in the back of my head that I'm missing important information.
Well, I'll say a few for me, and then Pete, I'd like you to also add to that list if you want to. Certainly the first and foremost 2 that we recommend to anybody who's going through photo reading is personal genius, which is like self-esteem for the learner. So just the knowing, the belief that you can do this, it's within you to be able to accomplish it. So personal genius, number 1. Number 2 is memory supercharger, which is that relationship with the inner mind, being able to receive back what it is that's gone into your brain with the studying that you've done. So those 2, first and foremost, top of the list. Now, I also think that a paraliminal like belief, especially if you have negative beliefs about yourself as a learner, I'm just no good, I can't do this, I'm no good at that, I'll never be up. Yeah, listen to the belief, because that's a 2-session paraliminal. First side is about the negative belief and rewriting it, and the second is about establishing a new belief, a belief in who you are as a photo reader. Then we talk about actually taking the action and doing the thing. If you keep putting it off, like, I know I should, but I'm not doing it, get around to it. Super powerful. If you really feel that you're getting to it, but it's not really a habit for you yet, a great one is the new action generator. Another one is self-discipline, to be able to just set aside the time on a daily or weekly basis to do this activity of photo reading. Then after that, if a person has a real fear that this isn't going to work for them, anxiety-free is a good one. But then the new option generator, where part of you says, well, I've got to read it word for word. And part of you says, you need to let that go and just photo read. Bring these 2 parts together with a new option generator and get that breakthrough into a new way of relating to written materials. And which ones would you say, Pete?
Well, the biggest go-to would be the SelfEsteem Supercharger, besides memory supercharger and personal genius. And the reason is for that, when I first started using it, it gives me such supreme self-confidence that I can accomplish anything. And so if you have any doubts about your ability to photo read, do the SelfEsteem Supercharger and then go into a photo reading session and activation session, and you'll see that you get a boost there. Another one that I recommend, if you've been in a photo reading seminar with an instructor or you've seen other people photo read, or you can even use the video on YouTube, the new behavior generator, because you can model somebody else photo reading, and that gives some strategies or some ways to doing it too that I think can be superb. And the third one.
That's a good one. I just want to add to the use of that one for a moment, is the idea that if you know that there are people in the world who can photo read, if you've been through the course, you've seen others photo read, and you think to yourself, well, they're getting a better result than I am, then you model what it is they're doing through the new behavior generator, and you get that interior landscape that says, yes, I can.
Excellent. So Paul, the other one is the photo reading.
You had one more you were going to say.
Pardon me?
There was one more you were going to say.
Yeah, the other one would be the PhotoReading Activator. Now, that's not one that I've used very much, and I honestly don't remember what it is. Can you talk about it a little?
Yeah, the PhotoReading Activator, you understand the idea of mental image rehearsal, that when there's something that we want to be able to do, we need to practice it in our mind. In the memory optimizer, we talk about your inner virtual reality movie generator, right? So what we're interested in doing is imagining ourselves going through all of the steps from the beginning of the system to the absolute last stage of the system. You see yourself, you mentally rehearse doing it with books. So you're practicing mentally what you then practice physically, and you double the effort. Now, here's why. And Vera Birkenbiel talks about this in the Memory Optimizer program. Knowledge grows like this, but skills grow like this. Long plateaus, little blips up. And the way that we accelerate our skill building is every time we do something, we then mentally do it. And the more you mentally do it, PhotoReading Activator, the better we are able to accomplish what it is we choose.
Excellent. So Paul, how about the question that came in about how do you, if you have legislative acts such as laws, directives, regulations, what would be the best approach for something like that? Or for the other person who wrote, I started a new job and I'm overwhelmed by the detailed and technical information that I need to know. And for her, her business, the job that she got is in water filtration. And she said she really didn't know anything about it. But now she finds herself having to amass a lot of knowledge in a very short period of time.
Yeah, in both those cases and in a lot of other ones, we need to remember that you do have to get the details. It is important to get the details. And people often mistakenly think that photo reading is just getting the big picture. You just flip, and that's it. No, that's not it. When you use the photo reading whole mind system, you start there and you go from whole to parts. The mistake that we got built into us as a result of traditional education, learning how to read, is we do parts, try to store those parts into a little 5 to 7 bit of information. We try to hold on to that. And then we go to the next 5 little bits of information. And then we try to hold on to both of those. And so we're going parts to whole. And that's putting the brain in the wrong gear for the work that's being demanded of it. So if it's medicine, if it's law, it's anything that a lot of small details are required, you always photo read it first. And then when you know that this is something you have to be able to get and be able to come back with the small details, you let your brain take you to those details. And then you might even mind map those particular pieces. Do you remember one of our early photo readers, Todd Lorang, had to work on these giant systems or air conditioning?
Oh yeah, he worked for Honeywell.
He worked for Honeywell and he took the technical classes. He didn't know anything about these systems. He was a top student in the classes. And he said to us, well, the reason was I photo read everything. So every time the instructor started talking, I immediately knew what that person was saying and I could flip open the manuals. So he'd get to these big installations on a service call. He'd look at it and there's these green beeping lights. And so he'd say, okay, that's volume 3 in this rack. And so he'd walk into his truck, open it, and right there it was. It was as if his thumbs could open to the pages that he wants. And it was, he said, that's absolutely because he had photo read it. And there's so many examples of this. I remember one of our photo readers was going to get a temp job. And she was asked by the temp agency if she could run this various office equipment, none of which she had ever turned on or even seen. She said, well, do you have any of the operating manuals? He said, yeah. So she got them, she photo read them, and she did what we call direct learning. She then was tested on each one of those pieces of equipment and passed the test right there on the spot. Now, you might wonder, well, how is this even possible? Great question. How is the mind capable of doing so much of what it does? For most of us, it's really a mystery, but that is what your brain is capable of doing. So don't be afraid of the fact that small details are things you're going to need to know. Just realize that in the use of the system, you'll get to those details, just not at the front end, at the back end of the use of the system.
Wonderful. Okay, so Paul, how about, I do most of my reading digitally. Does mouse clicks replace the flip the page? So this is a procedure or a process question.
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways that we recommend reading from digital media. Certainly if you have an e-reader where you can flip and it mirrors, it kind of mimics that. It even has a little sound to it as if the page is whooshing past. Certainly use that. Mouse click would be great. However, I don't recommend scrolling. I recommend page down. So as you click the mouse, you're just allowing yourself to view the overall screen. Your eyes are in the middle of it like that. You photo read the whole thing forward, photo read it all backwards. And then as you begin your activation, you go for those areas that carry the most meaning for you. Start there and build. So you get to what you need to in the time that you have available. Now, very often when you're flipping, and you know this, Pete, because you've demonstrated a lot in a lot of different settings, there's a part of you in the flipping that says, whoa, back there, that's where it was. That's the thing that I need to know. It's remarkable how the brain, even looking at a page that's upside down and backwards, can spot that. But it's true, it only takes about 1/4 of a second to be able to process the entire page of text. So as you're photo reading through it and clicking down through the pages, your mind is getting all of that, and it's getting the reinforcement that you need. So it's a matter of getting comfortable with looking at the center of that screen and not worrying about the details. And then as you get to page after page and being able to do soup reading, dipping, or skittering, you really get through the material that you have in a fraction of the time that it would normally take.
So Paul, you mentioned that when you're doing something on a screen that you would recommend the flipping of the pages as opposed to the scrolling. I've done it both ways. When I've done the demonstrations with them, I haven't found that one way was better than another for me learning from the material. So I would play with that and see what works best for you, if it's the clicking or the scrolling. And I do it both. But now, most of the time when I'm, using my phone and I'm photo reading on the phone, I'm doing but what I do is I also make the text as small as I possibly can on the screen so I can still see the letters. And that way it doesn't take me as long to go through the book on the Kindle or whatever app I'm using at the time.
Good. Yeah, makes sense.
Hey, Paul, someone asked too about, I struggle learning anything online. What tips can you give me?
Well, we'll go back to that idea of struggle. If that struggle is a lack of confidence, if it's a lack of proof positive that you've been able to do it in the past, if you're thinking that your inability to do it in the past disqualifies you from being able to do it in the future, then there's some great paraliminals that can help with that. Since so much of what we're going for on a daily basis is available to us through online resource materials and references, think about when you do look up something on the spot, where you say to your device, hey, find this bit of information for me, use that as a starting place. The other thing that begins to happen is you start to develop an interest. And once you have a sense of interest in the thing that you're looking for, first it's desire, right? Or you give it your attention, you develop an interest, and then you create a deeper desire for more of it. What that begins to do is it gets you into that media as a means to getting the information you want. Now, the formula is 4 parts: attention, interest, desire, action. So this AIDA formula is great for anything that you may be discounting yourself from. For example, I have clients that need to pass math exams as a part of certification. And they say, I've never really done very good at math. So as a result of that, how much math do they do on an ongoing basis? Basically, they avoid it at all costs. So you first have to give it your attention, and then find something in what you're doing that gives you a sense of interest, build that desire power within you. Then taking action on what you desire is much easier. So my encouragement, go easy on yourself and do a lot more playing with it, and recognize that this will become a way in which you learn most effectively someday.
Thank you. And Paul, someone just kind of set us up for a question, and I think they knew that we were going to be going in this direction during the session at some point. Are you going to talk about the retreat? So let's talk about the retreat and then come back with some questions. And we will definitely save time to be able to talk about what I was doing on the TV and how I was able to photo read and answer the questions immediately after photo reading. But first of all, Paul, can you talk about what's going to be happening at the retreat? And this is the first retreat that we've done in 9 years for photo reading. So this should be quite interesting.
Has it really been that long?
I think it's 2012. Yeah.
Wow. Well, the key, and we'll go back to the very first question that I addressed, it's this idea of practice. Everybody who knows photo reading realizes that they don't do it as much as they wish they would. And so this is an opportunity to truly practice, but to practice in a safe container that allows you to build resourceful states in your practice. They say practice makes perfect, but that's not true. It's perfect practice makes perfect. And so what we need to be able to do is do the system repeatedly on books that you're quite motivated to get better at. Any subject area that you want to grow within yourself, and we really focus on 4 areas in our days together: success, health, relationships, and growth. And that might be spiritual growth, personal growth, professional growth. You can really determine it for yourself, but you'll have stacks of books in each of these areas. You'll go out, you'll grab those books, you'll move through those stacks of books. You'll focus your energies on them, and we'll also do direct learning so that the information, knowledge, and skills that you choose to learn are actually becoming activated within you as we go through our days together. And because it's a safe environment and it's a collaborative environment, you're going to be able to test yourself on the knowledge and skills that you gain. And that's also really helpful, is getting good feedback that this is working for you. And there's a number of ways in which we'll do that. But the idea is, let's set aside a number of days in which we can just fully immerse ourselves in photo reading and activating. Now, everybody who comes into it already knows how to photo read, either by a home study course or through a live seminar, but we're going to enhance each one of the steps so that you really feel comfortable with each one of them. You know how you can modify the system as you need to. You come out of the retreat really feeling a personal relationship with how you go into written materials. And it doesn't matter what kind. If it's novels for pleasure reading, or it's technical information for an area of your life that you would like to explore, or if it's professional information for the purpose of certification, or if you're a student or a graduate school student, you're going to be able to develop an affinity not only to the photo reading whole mind system, but to the 2 powers that make this work: Number one is that you have a vast non-conscious mind. We're really going to be working with your relationship with that vast internal resource within. Second is the pre-conscious processor. And I have to say, P, and this is also kind of leading us into what we're going to be talking about, why you were able to do what you did on television. It's this idea that the pre-conscious processor gives us a reception of information, an acquisition of information, but it bypasses your conscious mind. And so in cognitive psychology, this is actually a field of study called the non-conscious acquisition of information. How could you possibly receive information you didn't know you received? Well, it's happening all the time. And when we are operating on information we receive that way, we call it intuition, psychic perception. The truth is we received it, subtle information that went directly into our mind, and now we're accessing it. And so the big opportunity, what I would say is kind of the banner across the whole retreat is, let's get to more spontaneous activation. Let's make the spontaneous activation of what it is we've learned, what it is we know but don't know that we know. Let's make that more available to us.
Well, how confident are you that, because this is going to be a virtual retreat and we're doing it on Zoom, how confident are you that people are going to get the results that they're looking for?
I've been doing virtual retreats for quite a while now. As you know, we did the photo reading program in April of 2020. It was our first really quick pivot. And we've had people attending photo reading on live stream while we're doing the live seminar, and it works great. So, I mean, there are ways also to help yourself out, and we'll talk about that. But absolutely, we can learn as effectively on a Zoom platform or on a virtual platform as we can if we're face-to-face. And hey, let's be honest, you're looking at me in a more intimate way than if you were in a classroom and I was up on a stage on a riser that far away. So it's really, I think, in a number of ways, a more intimate experience when we're in this sort of interaction. The differences that make a difference between a virtual and a live retreat are some of those more spontaneous, unplanned interactions that happen because you're with collaborators in a group of like-minded people that have come together from all over the world. Well, we get that because we have breakout rooms and because we establish this as a collaborative learning environment. It really is an effective way to attend a retreat.
Excellent. You know, one of the things that kind of surprised us as a company after we went to the virtual retreats on Zoom was that the satisfaction level in the seminars that we were doing increased. Yeah. And it is because, like what you were saying, you feel more connected with Paul Scheele. And so if you're thinking about it, by all means, do come to it. I'm going to put a slide up now too. So you can get the dates, and if you'd like to attend, it would be so sweet if you did. We're doing it in November, and it's going to be a Wednesday through Sunday, November 10th through the 14th. And each session is going to be from 10 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. So they're not going to be really, really long days. They're just going to be perfect to be able to come in and do what you need to do and have a comfortable day on both ends of it. The tuition for the course is 10 payments of $150. And what we'd like you to do now is to save you a spot, put a $150 deposit now. Just go to that URL that's on the screen there. As a matter of fact, I'll copy it into the that chat thing so that you have that if you want to go to that page now. And that will put the deposit into your shopping cart so you can enroll with that. And the cool thing is too, is that you can cancel out of the program up until the very last minute and get a full refund. So you're not going to be penalized for canceling if you decide you don't want to do it for whatever the reason is. But the important thing is that when you do it now, you're going to be setting yourself up, knowing that in November, you're going to be going for the retreat, and you're going to be looking at information differently in the weeks to come. And you'll be probably photo reading more and activating more just because you've made that commitment for the retreat. And when you make your $150 deposit now, the remaining 9 payments will be charged automatically to the same credit card beginning on November 3rd. And if you want to pay it in full, which a variety of people will, you're welcome to do that too. Just let us know. If you've already been to one of the photo reading retreats, which were 2004, 2007, 2012, so yep, it's been 9 years, you'll save $300 from your tuition. Just put a message in the comment field that you're in one of the other retreats, and customer service will take care of it. And we're also going to have a little a bonus or a way to acknowledge you for deciding that you're going to be enrolling in the retreat today. If you do enroll in the next 24 hours by 5 o'clock Central on Thursday, we'll take $50 off the final payment. So that's our way of rewarding you for joining today's session and then actively working on your photo reading and committing to the photo reading class. And if you've already enrolled in the photo reading retreat and you haven't received this discount because maybe you're on last month's call, then just drop an email to customer service at learningstrategies.com and they'll help you out with that. So I think that's it for the retreat. Paul, do you have any more comments about it?
Of course, we'll have lots of comments about it. The main thing, because the days aren't super long, they're very relaxing. We'll do a lot of what I call the joy spring protocol, where we're standing up, we're hydrating, we're doing tapping, we're doing movement, we're really developing our ability to quickly drop in, get into state, get into the photo reading process. You're going to find this streamlined ability to communicate with the resources that are within you. And as you may know, that has been my life's work. So it's what got me into this line of work initially, and it has really come into a major focus with my doctoral studies and ways of making these vast resources within us so much more accessible. And don't worry about limitations that you may have experienced in the past. You have the ability to overcome those limitations right now.
So Paul, when you have a book, how many activation sessions do you usually spend with the book, or how long do you spend activating it?
Well, I always say that when you're activating, you think about it in small chunks of time. So I remember reading a question somebody had asked about, they get into the post view and they default to regular reading. And that's the kind of thing that we want to avoid. We want to help the mind get all the information, understand it, and then deliver to us where we should go to get it at a conscious level. So when we're activating, I like to say, take smaller chunks. And a 20-minute activation is fine. Some people can do it in 10, 12 minutes. Some people take a half an hour and feel that that's fine. But I like to think of it in smaller chunks and then test. Say, have I gotten what I need out of it? Now, the place that really made that stand out, Pete, is in working with students on very difficult texts, like big college textbooks. And you can go through the chapter, you photo read it, you activate it, and you go to class the next day. The class becomes an activation, and you ask yourself, did I know everything that the professor was talking about? Was there anything she said that I might have missed when I went through the book before? And if so, there's a next step that you can take. And that's really always the case, is we can always take a next step. if it's an additional level of super reading and dipping or skittering in some section of the book, or if it's moving from the beginning of the book to the end using rapid reading, there's always a next level of confirmation. And at first, I will say that a lot of people have doubted because the amount of time that it's taking them to get to that level of satisfaction that they really got it, the feeling of contentment, I know this material, is so much less than they're used to spending on it. It's a little disconcerting at first. Well, I couldn't possibly, I hardly did anything with it. How could I possibly know this much? Well, once you realize that you have that level of communication with your mind, that your mind really is using the system to its maximum advantage, you learn to trust it. And an example that I had when going to my doctoral studies, I didn't do the reading assignment that was assigned. I photo read the book while I was on the flight going to the next residency. And when it turned out we got there, the professor put on the phone the author of the book. It was very interesting because I love the book. I'd only spent about 20 minutes activating it, but felt that I really knew the book. And there was one story that I spent most of my time with within the context of the book. And when the author was speaking to the questions that were being asked, the one story that he referenced back to was the one that I felt was the seminal story of the entire book. So it's as if my mind, out of all those pages, had said, Paul, this is what you absolutely need to know for what you're going to be doing with this book. There are a lot of other stories, a lot of other people that confirm the same finding. But like I say, at first, that's very disconcerting because now you're going into a situation where you could be shown that you failed, that you didn't do what you needed to do. You might blow it. But when you trust it, you realize my mind can do this. And it will always give me what it is I need to successfully pass this next step in the trajectory toward my goal.
Sweet. So Paul, let's talk about that television show that we sent everybody a link to.
Yeah.
And when I was photo reading books, and then they were asking me questions and knew the answers for them. So I'm good?
Absolutely, please.
Yeah. So one of the things those were pre-recorded, and there were some things that were left out that when we did live programs were not left out, whether it was live programs on the radio or live programs on TV. And that is on some live programs, when they would ask a question, I wouldn't have the foggiest idea what the answer was. And so then they would ask the next question or the next question, that all of a sudden one of the questions would kind of trigger a flow of information. So on that, the TV show that you saw there was one book that they were doing, and they asked me some questions. I had no idea. So the director, called a stop to it. And then they asked me to, have a drink of water or go for a walk and stuff like that. And they said, well, why aren't you getting it? I said, I don't know. Ask me more questions. And then they started to ask me more questions. And then, all of a sudden I knew all the previous answers. So I just kept talking to him. Then he yelled, okay, stop, let's get you back on camera and let's film that. So Paul, what does that describe?
Okay, this is really a great one. And I want to go back to the very early days of teaching photo reading, when what we would do is something called comprehension tests. So
Yes.
take a book, right? And then there'd be 10 true false questions and 15 multiple choice, A, B, C. So all we would do with the book, all we would do is flip, 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 close it, and then I would read the questions. Now, there are people who would get 100%. They get every single thing right. And I'd ask them, how do you do that? Well, wasn't I supposed to be able to? And then there are other people who would take the test and they'd get half of what they would get if they just randomly guessed. And I'd say, how did you do that? And they said, well, I would think to myself, if I was the author and if I was writing about that, what would I say? And they'd move all into their conscious mind. Well, wait a minute. The information that you photo read isn't in your conscious mind. So it doesn't make sense to look for it in the conscious mind. It's in your non-conscious mind. And it's a matter of bringing it forward from that non-conscious realm, like intuition is. And so how would intuition work? Well, we start looking at people who would get 60, 70, 80, 90%. And consistently, here's what they did, Pete. They let go of it at a conscious level. They didn't worry about whether or not they were going to get it right. If they got one wrong, it's fine. Notice it, own it, play with it. They'd get one right. That's fine. That's great. Notice it, own it, refine your intuition, feel the way that information came to you. And so what we saw is when people would let it go at a conscious level, the results would go way up. When they try to glom onto it at a conscious level, the results would go way down. And years later, Pete, after we had been doing that sort of thing and moved on from that, there was Dr. Dale Schusterman, who was an expert in applied kinesiology in Virginia, who took the photo reading course and became a photo reading instructor. And one of the things that he noticed is when people would photo read and then they'd move to activation, they would switch off their digestive system. Like from here to here, they'd go weak. He couldn't figure out what that was about. And he started studying it and recognized something very important. When you take in information pre-consciously, it's going into your neurophysiology, to your body mind. And it's your body mind that has to digest it. And if you try to get it at a conscious level, like you were doing when you first read something, it literally cuts off your ability to digest it or to integrate it at a non-conscious level. And so we do a little process that overcomes that, and people start getting the results that they were looking for. So there are two things that you did, Pete, and certainly in that story that you told is a great example of that. They'd ask a question, you'd have no idea. And then a little bit of a worry would come in, like, how come I'm not getting this? Where's that information? And when does it come in? When you let it go. Somebody asks you a question, and you just notice what shows up, and boom, all of a sudden, the flood, literally the tsunami of information is all right there for you. Why? It's already there for you, but it's our ability to overcome those repression mechanisms that are built into traditional education and just let it go, just be playful. And that's something that I think comes in really well in that film that you did, is the playfulness of it. You've got a smile on your face, you're blowing away the interviewer, but you were learning about photo reading at the time that you were doing that. You were learning some of those protocols, some of those things that we were just discovering in the classrooms in the early days of teaching it.
One of the things too is I didn't care whether or not I failed. Not so much when we're there doing the filming, but the other ones like live radio or live TV, because if I didn't get the questions right, 20 minutes later, no one's going to remember it at all. And I remember one, and I've always performed well, but I remember one of the radio shows is in Minneapolis, and folks are at the office around the radio listening to it, and they're asking me questions, and I wasn't coming, and someone said, oh my God, this is the time that he's going to blow it completely. And just like that, it came. And how it would come is usually it would first come as a picture. And once I'd get the picture of it, then I could pull the string and get all the images and everything from the pictures to the feelings to the sounds with that. There's one time I did one show one time, and the host asked me, what was the significance of red wine in the conference room? And nothing popped up. So then I started to kind of left brain it, but why would they have wine in the conference room? Were they celebrating? Well, that was the end of it. They stopped it. Then they asked me what I want to do from there. And I said, well, just ask me some more questions. And before they even got to that, the guy who wrote the questions for the host said, no, that's not red wine. That's red wire. And I said, oh, there's a red wire. There's a bomb in the conference room. Right then and there, the whole thing came up. And so that was one, too, where we went back and continued the conversation because it was something that had came through on visually. And there's one of them on one of the shows where we're doing on the screen. They asked me a question. I had no idea what the answer was, but I saw the words cheap jack. And I answered with cheap jack. And I had no idea what a cheap jack was. And then all of a sudden, I saw these images of this guy by an old wagon, and he was selling stuff off of it. And so then I started to describe, oh, sure enough, that's what a cheap jack is. It's somebody who hawked stuff off of a wagon in the old days. And so it was just a matter of letting stuff come up, playing with it, trusting it, and going with it.
Good. And this is that word, trusting it and going with it. I have to say, that's the thing that most people fear most, is that they're not going to be able to trust it. Why? Well, because I've blown it in the past. I've made mistakes in my past. Well, those early wounds that we experienced in school, you didn't read it well and you blew it and you got tested on it. And do you remember there was a real estate developer who dropped out of school, I think, and he was in 9th grade, became a multi-millionaire. He never read a book in his entire life. He took photo reading. I think, how old was he? Like 46 or 47, something.
Oh, he was older than that. Wasn't that Charlie?
Yeah, Charlie.
Yeah.
So he had never read an entire book, and he read dozens of books after that. And he said, I'm living a new life. It's so spectacular. So he was able to overcome a history of being a wounded learner. And the difference that made a difference is exactly what you're saying, is you begin to trust that your mind can do this.
Yeah, exactly. So Paul, we only got a couple minutes left. Let me refresh everybody about the retreat, the details on it, and then we'll come back to you. And if you can kind of do a wrap up for folks. Sound good?
Sure. Okay,
so we're not able to get to all the questions, but we'll do this again. So first of all, here's the screen again. The retreat begins on November 10th, and it is 4 days in a row. And we're getting together from 10 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon Central Time, 3:30 Central Time. The payment, the tuition is 10 payments of $150. But what you can do now is you can put a $150 deposit down, and you can go to learningstrategies.com/be-with-Paul. And then that week before November 3rd is when we will start charging the rest of the payments, one monthly payment through the remaining 9 months. And if you want, you're welcome to pay the tuition in full, about 20% due. If you've been to one of the past retreats, you get a $300 savings. So just put a note in the comment field. And even if you don't put the note in the comment field, we'll look up your name to see if you were, so we'll give you the credit for it. And if you enroll in the next 24 hours, we'll give you a $50 credit on the last payment of your payment plan. So that's our way of rewarding you for being here today and making the commitment now to be with Paul in November. So Paul, that hour went by really quickly.
Yeah, quick review. If you know that in order to get better at photo reading, you need to practice, then let's set aside the time and let's practice in a way that really leads to that perfect use of this magnificent mind that you have. You've got a vast non-conscious mind. You've got an absolutely spectacular pre-conscious processor. Let's use this system to get through to the goals that you want to, get through the materials that will assist you. Imagine having 10 authors speaking to you about your goal and being able to guide and move you forward to accomplishing greater success, better health, improved relationships, and personal and professional growth. This is what we're going to be able to do in our time together. You're going to be able to practice it, and in a collaborative learning environment, really learn to trust your mind can do this. And let's start putting it to work. This is the opportunity to really up-level your life. I'm in. I'm looking forward to having this time to play with you in the retreat.
Fantastic. And thank everybody for being here. I will put the slide back up on the screen, and I'll stand for a couple minutes and answer the questions that we didn't address. So if you asked a question, just stay on and you'll get it probably within 5 to 10 minutes. So again, thank you. And thank you, Paul.
Thanks,
we'll
Pete.
be back again sometime. Bye.
Great being with you. Bye-bye.